the Croats know that if they don't do certain things, if they don't meet certain standards, if they don't have certain legislation, they're not going to be able to succeed at their accession to the EU. And so they're going to do it. No, they may not do it as well as they ought to do it, but they will do it. And the guys, I mean, the senior police that I met in Croatia, former national director of police, a guy who was negotiating with the EU. They all spoke English really well. They're excellent. And so now how far that goes down the line is another issue, but at least they're doing the kinds of things that need to be done. Similarly, in Macedonia, one can make the argument, you know, after the disturbances in 2002 in the Ohrid Agreement, the international community is a little more present with monitoring there, but they were in Croatia too for a long time. But they're trying to force them. They don't have the right to tell them what to do, whereas in Kosovo, as I was told, we were the state. I mean, the UN was the state in Kosovo. I mean, we were sovereign. And in Bosnia, sovereignty was really quite messy, given the powers of the high rep. And so it works better, definitely, in places, although it's not necessarily big-ticket reform. Then, of course, there are we talk about white knights and spoilers. And there are people like Milorad Dodik, who is the prime minister, or we like to refer to him as the king, of Republika Srpska, which is one of the two entities in Bosnia. And Dodik is the man. And, I mean, he controls politics in his entity in the way that, well, I wouldn't say quite like Stalin did, but, I mean, he is the guy. And if you want to talk to the people who are powerful, it's him and high-ranking, what I call the high-ranking wankers in his party are the guys that you really want to talk to. You know, those are the ones. And you know, those guys are smart. Now, we created Dodik. We, the international community, Ambassador Gelbard, when he was the U.S. representative there, in '98, after these elections, after this little war that took place between the police within Republika Srpska, Dodik, who had been a good guy, he had been opposed to Karadzic and all of this, we created him. I mean, he did not win any kind of decisive victory, but we used a lot of our diplomatic pressure and other things to get Dodik in power. And then once he got up to the plate, he managed to begin doing quite well, and so that he's the man there now. And so all of a sudden, he is moving against reform. And I don't know how much you know here about the reform in Bosnia, police reform. It's quite complicated, and I don't have time to go into great detail, but what it does is that it creates these policing districts that extend beyond a single entity, so that what it does is it eliminates the authority of the entity ministries, and it tries to centralize the police. And well, the Serb people that I talked to when I was in Banja Luka, I mean the Serb authorities, from the president of the parliament, leaders of parties and stuff, they all had a series of quite cogent arguments against this that were really technical about what was wrong with the reform. And then they go to a political argument. They say, look, we didn't commit the war crimes. We struggled again. We were in trouble during the war, and this isn't our fight. So, you should allow us to hold on to our entity, and you're not going to affect constitutional reform in the name of police reform. And by the way, they would say, look at Germany. The police in Germany, that's a modern state. You can't get better than Germany when it comes to kind of national effectiveness. Their police is regional. The Länder organize the major police in Germany. It doesn't have to be like France or Sweden. And they go on like that. And so the question is, those who drove the police reform now view him as a spoiler. There was talk about removing him, all this kind of stuff. And so, in the same way that we did to Milosevic, during the war up until '99, when he was not cooperative when it came to questions of Kosovo, we liked Milosevic. I had many bosses tell me, we're going to go off to Belgrade. Karadzic is giving us a hard time. We've got to go talk to Milosevic. He'll sort it out. That he was the guy. We would go try to sort things out with Tudjman in eastern Slavonia, and Shushak, who was the defense minister. At the same time that these guys were helping us a little bit in eastern Slavonia, they were creating tremendous problems in Bosnia because they were sorted, and that was their issue. So there are those sorts of things. So at the end of the day, I would say that police reform becomes a kind of a social construct. That it's not, you have to make a distinction between providing security and all of that and trying to get them to be like us, that is trying to create this. So this leads to some of our conclusions. And the first conclusion, which Paula already talked about, is that international engagement can work. And it can work in policing the same way it works in decentralization in local government. I mean, you can teach them technique. You go to people who will be very critical of the Republika Srpska police, for example, and they will tell you that they're good police, they're polite, they know how to do the business, they just work for particular politicians who tell them what to do. And the politicians are the ones we don't like, but the police know how to do the business of policing. So that there's that element. Then there's a question of teaching them how to do certain techniques, forensics, certain kinds of case tracking, certain kinds of witness protection, all those sorts of things that that you can teach them. And there's great successes. The ICITAP program, that is International Criminal Investigative Training and Assistance Program. That's what it is. I can never remember what ICITAP, over 10 years, I can't remember what ICITAP stands for. It's out of the Department of Justice. It's had tremendous success in training these guys. All of these kind of really small, defined projects and teaching them how to do policing. And it leaves politics aside. So international engagement can work.